Risky business with Pete and Teresa. Talking trouble till it turns into reason. From our old moments till we got this fixes. They're riding that line between safe and ambitious. Risky business with Pete and Teresa. Where smart beats lucky every season.
G'day everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Risky Business, a new podcast all about the world of risk management. I'm one of your hosts, Pete Gervasoni, and I'm joined by the person who keeps my wildest ideas from actually burning down the building.
Hello, it's me, Teresa Riccio-Goodwin, and someone has to do it, Pete. So look, it's great to be here, and I know what people are thinking, a podcast about risk. Well, I'd probably rather watch paint dry in a rainstorm, but we promise this podcast is not about boring checklists.
Yeah, exactly, Teresa. We're here to argue that risk management is actually the most exciting part of your business. Mm-hmm. It's not about the department of no, it's about the department of how. How do we do the big, bold things without ending up as a cautionary tale in some risk journal somewhere or on the evening news?
Exactly. And it's not even about the fun police. It's more about how do we get to where we're going, how do we kick the goals that we want to achieve and deliver in a safe way that, you know, protects the business, protects our people.
Yeah, absolutely, Teresa. When you think about it, how often have you walked into a room, whether it's the boardroom, into a meeting, and there is just absolute crickets because they're like, the risk team's here.
Yep. Here we go.
Silence.
But risk is the new sexy. I think being prepared for what's coming and we talk about risk-based decisions a lot and having that thought process around, well, what am I committing to? But that is risk, thinking about it.
Absolutely. And really having that future focus across our organisations. Because when we think about it, during the global pandemic that kicked off, late 2019, early 2020, is that was the time that risk managers became the new superheroes of the organisation because all of a sudden our boards and our executive teams have seen the value of having an effective risk management in place.
100%. So if I can bring up an example, in 2018 I was living in the UK and we had risk scenario analysis. So it was like a risk review, but we brought in a very real example of a risk event that could happen and would the team be prepared. So we're working with the asset management team and we said, look, you know, we're seeing a lot of data, death on the high street. So a lot of shops are closing their bricks and mortar trade. If we have a whole lot of concessions pull out, so at that time I was working at a shopping centre company, real estate, shopping centres all over the UK and Spain. And I was speaking to the asset management team and said, you know, if we lose all these concessions, what would happen and how would we function? And the senior asset manager was like, well, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to enter into this conversation. That is never going to happen. But Pete, it did happen.
I love it when they go, it's never going to happen to us.
Exactly. So in 2019, that is exactly what happened. Unfortunately, that company isn't in business anymore for a range of reasons, not specific to, you know, concessions, pulling out rent and stuff like that. But if we think about it from a risk perspective, it could go wrong. Anything could go wrong. And if we think about it in a really, I suppose, safe way, how do we protect ourselves in those periods of uncertainty? We're just setting ourselves up for success.
Yeah, 100%. And that just sort of sparks a memory of my own sort of little war story there, Teresa. And I'm going back even further now to, I think, 2013.
Yeah.
And I was working with an organisation and we decided we wanted to test our crisis management plans and our business continuity plans. And so the scenario we ran was a global pandemic.
Okay.
And so we step into the room.
Yep.
The crisis team sits down. The crisis manager opens up the crisis management plan. Yes, it was on paper back there, folks. Opens up the plan. And then I commenced the scenario saying that we're a local organisation that is now confronted with a global pandemic that has actually hit our local town.
Yeah.
I kid you not, the crisis manager closes up the crisis management plan and says, this will never happen to us. And if it did, the state government would take control and we would not have any role to play.
Wowzers.
And so in 2020, was very tempted to pick up the phone and call that person and go, haha, told you so.
How's it going?
Yeah, exactly. How are you surviving through this global pandemic that was never going to happen and you wouldn't have a role to play?
Exactly.
But that was the mindset.
Yeah.
And even, I don't want to sort of harbour too much on the pandemic, but even at the time when boards were asking their executives, well, why wasn't a global pandemic on the risk register?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, because A, it's not a risk.
Yeah.
Why did we know this was going to happen? It's like, well, we knew it would because it only happened 100 years prior to with the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
So why is this so unexpected?
Exactly. And we did see some of those, not necessarily a global pandemic, but we did have warnings like with SARS, swine flu. You know, there were a whole range of this could get worse, this could get maximised, but it was contained until, you know, the almighty COVID.
Yeah, that's it. And look, I think one great thing about risk management, and in one of our future podcasts, we're going to start talking about organizational resilience, is really trying to ensure that we're capturing those lessons learned. So we can really learn from these experiences, incorporate that into how we continue to do business, and then ultimately that we survive and prosper as organizations.
Yeah, 100%. And there is so much to learn when it turns to shit. Yeah. Like there's so much to look at and reflect back on and bring into, you know, the way you think about things, the decisions you're making, but you don't always want to be on the back foot.
Absolutely, absolutely not. I think that really risk management is such a important part of your toolkit in running an organization. It doesn't matter what size or the complexity of that organization, but risk management's got to be a key tool in your arsenal, because if you don't do it well, if you're just doing tick and flick types of exercises, then you will fail.
Yeah, you get hit harder.
That's exactly right. So you've got to invest the time and the effort into understanding your landscape and understanding how you're going to manage risk, and that will set you up for success. So, you know, like if you think about if we don't take risk, you know, we may as well just stay in bed. But even with that, we might stay in bed and
bed
then
sores.
roll out of bed. So, you know, you basically just become a museum exhibit.
Yeah.
Boring. Who wants to be that?
Exactly. What's your so in your experience, what would you say is one of those I suppose indicators that the board and the executive are thinking about risk, incorporating risk into their decision making? What would you say is one of those indicators that it's definitely on their agenda?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think knowing that when the board is engaged is when they're starting to look at their next strategic plan. And as they're trying to work out what their strategic objectives are, we want to get the risk team in and have them part of the conversation. And again, it's not about to say, no, don't pursue it. It's about actually, can we take on more risk?
Yeah.
You know, is this, you know, well within our appetite so we can actually go and pursue other things?
Yeah.
We might take a $200,000 investment from here and redivert it to pursuing another objective that might make us a leader in that market. So it's, again, it's that perception of risk being, it's all about the downside.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've got this saying that managing risk will maximize opportunities.
Yes.
And that's really about how do we sort of get that engagement. So when the board and executive are engaged, you're part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And then when they're starting to make decisions, they're actually using the risk appetite that they've set on behalf of the organization. They're actually asking for risk information to be presented to them, and they're asking the right questions. And I was just working with a board recently, and one of the board directors asked management about controls.
Yeah.
Oh, so how are you controlling these potential causes and consequences, and how effective are those controls? I did an internal high five going, this is awesome.
Brilliant.
Yeah, man, you rock. And I actually turned to that director and said, man, you rock. That's one of the best questions I've heard asked from a board director, because that's the shit you need to know.
Exactly.
We get that wrong. And that's where you're going to increase the likelihood that risk will materialize, or you're going to increase the consequences. So that was a defining moment for me, Teresa, when you see that engagement from the board and they actually give a shit about this stuff.
Yeah. So to continue on that, because I think that's such a fantastic thought, Oxford and James, we've got mitigate risk and maximise opportunity as our tagline, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. If you're thinking about your risk, you're managing your risk, you are in fact maximising opportunity. And one of the things, probably my favourite board meeting, was when we'd presented some of the outcomes for a risk review, and we said these are the changes in the risk, and we're moving in the maturity journey. So it was a lot of, talking about what had been documented in a spreadsheet, and moving forward from very traditional risk management practices into something a little bit more proactive. And one of the directors turned around and said, I really disagree with that risk rating because of all the controls you've got listed there. We know for a fact, as the board, the reports that we've seen, these controls are not effective. We've seen breaches. We've seen things that indicate the control environment is not as strong to have the risk rated that low.
Amazing. That's so good.
And it was. And what was really interesting is some of the information that was being shared in that board meeting hadn't been shared with the risk team. But it was about, okay, how do we collaborate and establish a really good working environment to get that information in real time, to work together with the business unit and say, we might have a problem here. How can we come to a suitable solution to document it all and monitor it safely?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, they've got engagement, they've got investment.
Yep.
And that's when your directors and your executive are really engaged with risk management.
Yep.
You'll start to see your opportunity shift, and ultimately you'll be working much better, feel more empowered to actually really pursue those strategic goals and objectives. What I'd be really keen to hear, and I'm pretty sure our listeners to the podcast be wanting to hear this too, Teresa. Tell me just in 30, 40 seconds, what made you fall in love with risk management?
What made me fall in love? And I did. I really, really did. It might be a bit one-sided. What made me fall in love with risk management was, I think, the complexity of it and the fact that it doesn't matter how technically minded you are, the application is different for every organisation you work with, every board you present to. It's so different. So while you can feel comfortable with, you can recite the ISO 31000 standard, but risk management is more art than science. And it's about knowing how do you translate what is better practice to an organisation. So my background is internal audit. I know.
No offence to our internal auditors.
And people are like, yeah, cut her from the party list. She's not coming.
Where's the mute button?
But part of it is the internal control was never a stick and a carrot. It was always saying, we've got so much potential. What can we do better? So from a continual improvement perspective. But then it morphed and my interest was more around your internal controls are critical, not just for, what internal audit are doing, obviously, but looking at your risk management. And I still see organisations in, 2026, that connection between the risks they've identified and their internal controls, it's not there.
Yeah. Yep.
So getting my hands dirty and working with organisations to leave them in a much better state.
Yes.
That's my jam.
Awesome. Great to hear. And I really think that, I can hear your passion for risk management in your voice, and having worked with you for many years, and knowing how you engage with participants in a risk workshop or in a risk education session, that passion really comes through, and it's infectious. And I think that's one of the key attributes of a really good risk practitioner is to be able to bring the enthusiasm. Because let's face it, risk can be pretty bloody boring.
100%.
And I've been to so many conferences and in so many risk workshops where it's like, stick a needle in me. Just wake me up. But I think when we as risk practitioners can actually really engage with the audience, we see transformation in the information we need to get from them. Yeah. And also, how cool is it? And we've been in workshops like this where people have walked out high-fiving each other going, that's the best workshop I've been to. Not just the best risk workshop I've been to.
But the best time ever.
100%.
That says something.
Yeah, totally.
But I think, Pete, having worked with you, a lot of, as part of the risk facilitation, a lot of that I did learn from you because you've had such an amazing career and you've been such a beacon for doing things in a very proactive way and moving away from those traditional risk management practices into something that's so valuable to an organisation.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. That's very nice of you to say.
You're welcome.
But I think for me, where a lot of that comes from, like my background, like I was a professional singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
And then I thought when I landed my first risk roll,
Yeah.
literally someone put a heat map in front of me and I said,
Oh God, the heat map.
and I said, what do all these colours mean?
What do I do with this?
And that's what I've gone, okay. So I went off and did a little bit of training and I've gone, so likelihood and consequence. Okay, great. And this is for a major state government department.
Who will not be named.
I will not name them. And this was back in pre-ISO 31000. So it was the Australian standard 4360.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And in 4360, it actually had a heat map in there and consequence and likelihood levels. And this organisation thought that was the standard
No.
consequence and likelihood tables that you use to manage risk.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was my first introduction to risk management. But I think what I found was that when I was facilitating risk workshops, I had this ridiculous idea that we could have a whole day to identify risk, to do our risk analysis, our risk evaluation, risk treatments, and wondered why about an hour and a half into that workshop, everyone was almost falling asleep.
Yeah.
In fact, me as the facilitator was almost falling asleep as well.
You didn't even want to be
No,
there.
exactly.
Yeah.
So by incorporating, a bit of music, a bit of movement, and really for me to bring the energy, it transformed how we really facilitated those workshops.
Yeah.
And I think it's so good that we've got people like yourself, I'll call out a couple of other people, Dr. Carl Gibson, Jason Brown, that do these really good engagements. Gav Schneider from Risk to Solution, doing these really good engaging ways to sort of activate the brain in people
and talk about risk.
100%. That's right. So I feel really encouraged by the direction that we're seeing the risk practitioner movement going. And I think that, as we see a lot of younger risk practitioners come through and are willing to try something a little bit different.
Yeah, the fresh legs.
Yeah, exactly. It's the future of where we're going to. Just before we close out the podcast for today, Teresa, I just want to touch.
Yeah.
I've got a note here that says, talk to Teresa about the S word. And of course, I'm referring to spreadsheets.
No, not the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Can you believe, and like working with a risk management solutions organisation such as Skefto, I can't believe in 2026 organisations are still trying to manage risks through Excel spreadsheet. Or in fact, I saw one recently, they were trying to do it through Microsoft Word and another one trying to use Visio.
No.
You know the old Visio diagrams?
No.
Unbelievable stuff. How they can manage risk in that way is beyond me. But, when you think about when we put information into a spreadsheet, who really looks at it?
No. And how can you expect people to then talk about their risks if you're slapping a spreadsheet on the screen in front of them?
Yep.
Even people who love spreadsheets at that point just completely switch off.
Exactly.
And don't want any part of it.
Especially when you get to row 455 and you're like, oh my God, I need to have my 10th coffee just to get through the spreadsheet.
Yeah, and you're bouncing off the walls, but not in a good way. The spreadsheet, I think, and you look at an organisation, if they've got nothing in place, great that you're recording something somewhere. But I've seen it go so terribly wrong where the version control is a mess. So people are operating off different spreadsheets and, data's removed, just completely deleted. So you have to track through version history.
Exactly.
Yeah, it adds a whole lot of complexities.
It does. And I think that's why, particularly for our executives and our boards, they're so reliant on heat maps and dashboards. I love them. I think it's, particularly if you've got it in a really good system where you literally you can get the high level information, but then click through and get some really good detailed information if you need that.
Yeah.
Dashboards and heat maps play a really key part there. If they're not going anywhere or telling a story, it's just what I call board porn.
Yeah.
They look at the colour and go, oh, this looks really exciting.
Look at those colours.
Yeah, exactly.
What's it telling me?
Nothing.
Sweet FA.
Yeah, that's it. So, and you just go, why? So I think, really dump the spreadsheets, folks. If you haven't looked at assisting it, go out and look for it because it will really help drive, that sort of transformational culture around risk in your organisations.
So true.
Teresa, look, we're almost running out of time here. So, it's been really exciting. I'm really looking forward to what we've got coming down the pipeline for
too.
our podcast series. So make sure you do subscribe to the Risky Business podcast. And we will be coming back on a weekly or monthly basis. We haven't decided yet.
We haven't.
Maybe we'll let you guys decide. If you'd like to hear more content, then please let us know and hit us up with some comments about the podcast. But importantly, that make sure you do subscribe to this one, because we will be dropping podcasts. We're going to have a focus on risk culture. We always talk about it. I think we've got another one on organisational resilience.
Yes, we do. Risk appetite.
Risk appetite. Oh, yeah. Actually, I'm looking forward to that one. Can we talk about curries or something?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think our interest in risk and the way we try to operate and the way we do things might be a little bit different. But more so, we see risk as not only a really powerful tool for executives and the board, but if you invest in it and you see the value in it, what you get out of it is just so much more than you can put a figure on.
Yeah, exactly, Teresa. It's been fantastic for our number one podcast, Teresa. Please stay risky, stay resilient.
Always.
And we'll speak to you at our next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Business with Pete and Teresa. Talking trouble till it turns into reason. From our old moments till we got this fixed. They're riding that line between safe and ambitious. Risky business with Pete and Teresa. We're smart.